All right, so welcome back, everyone. We are doing Cyrano de Bergerac tonight. It's going to be a smaller group, but we'll try to make it interactive. And uh, let's I'm encouraging everyone to participate because obviously we all have finite amount of things to say by ourselves, but the whole point of these groups is to share ideas and to have a dialogue and to explore together. So I guess I'm not going to take too much time introducing this play. I think it's very familiar to most of us. We were just talking about how many times each of us got exposed to it before this reading. And, Cyrano de Bergerac has been staged many times. There have been many cinema versions of the play. Obviously, has been translated into many different languages. So it's been a very successful play. Right from the start, it was written in 1897 by Edmond Rostand, and in that same year, it was staged in a theater in Paris. The person that played Cyrano, his name is Constant Coughlin, and he performed over 400 times. So obviously, that tells you that this was a very popular play, and I find it extremely, I guess, entertaining to read. I absolutely enjoy the humor of it, the wit, the plot is very dynamic, easy to follow. However, as I was chatting with Joe prior to recording this, I have to say it doesn't really grab me as in the same way as some of the other maybe Greek plays or even some of the more contemporary plays that we've done. And I'm curious what you guys think. Does it have, in your opinion, does it have that same sort of a deep quality of thought, of analysis, or whatever it is that makes a play, grab us in some way, intellectually, emotionally, whatever it happens to be? I'm very curious what you think about that. No problem, Patrick. So while we're thinking about that, I guess let me just introduce kind of the main, very quickly, again, in a summary fashion, the plot, the kind of the main characters, and we'll go into the discussion from there. So the play is staged in Paris and in France. It's based loosely on an actual historical figure. Cyrano de Bergerac was a real person. He did live in 1600s. He had a cousin named Roxanne, who actually did marry someone named Christian de Neuvillette, who was from Gascony. So there's a lot of these sort of parts of the play that actually are historical. Now the story, the rest of it is the love story, the love triangle, mostly fictionalized. Cyrano de Bergerac himself was I guess the only thing that is historically accurate is he was a very sort of a devil-may-care type person. He was famous for his duels and kind of a profligate lifestyle. He was a bit of a womanizer and just kind of burned the candle at both ends. So definitely that part of the story rings true to the historical prototype. Now, another interesting part was this the theme of the war, and the war was also part of the historical sort of landscape of the play or background of the play. It's the 30 Years' War in Europe, which was one of the bloodiest wars. Battle of Arras was the conflict between France and Spain, and the actual Cyrano de Bergerac, the historical Cyrano de Bergerac, did participate in that as well. So, so we have a lot of these tidbits that are sprinkled throughout the play that are very interesting from a historical standpoint. All right, so let's see what else. let's see what else we can say. So obviously, the plot is pretty simplistic. You have, not simplistic, I shouldn't say, it's easy to summarize. So you have Cyrano de Bergerac, who is this very witty, very courageous, flamboyant. He's a soldier. He's I guess kind of a middle-class person, a writer, a poet, a philosopher, and he is in love with Roxanne, a beautiful cousin of his, who he unfortunately is not pursuing because he has this disfigurement. He has a nose that's too big, disproportionate to the rest of him. So he is very much ashamed of that and very sensitive about it, and that kind of sets it all up. Roxanne, on the other hand, is in love, not with him, with this other young man, Christian, who just, for all his outward qualities, his beauty and so on, is not very intellectually developed, let's put it this way. So he not very shiny in terms of his wit or his just basic.
Hey, Philip, I have one friend in the waiting room. His name is Daniel Doberman. Sorry to interrupt.
No problem. Joe, can you take a look at that? Right. So, yeah. So the just one sec. So the story develops with Roxanne opening up to Cyrano and kind of letting her feelings be known about towards Christian, and then basically ask him to look over him. Now Cyrano encounters Christian, realizes that he doesn't stand a chance with Roxanne because he's not able to impress her again with any sort of romantic gestures or his eloquence. And so he decides to form this pact with Christian. He's going to write to Roxanne, representing as if he were Christian, and then sort of use his wit, use his ability to kind of finesse words and so on to impress her while pretending to be Christian. So essentially, he in some ways, he's going to feel love because she's going to be reading his letters, right? She's going to be reading his expressions of love towards him, not knowing that it's him. On the other side, it's as if he now kind of borrows the appearances of Christian. He's beautiful, he's young, he's everything that Cyrano is not. So you have this sort of symbiotic relationship between the two. Joseph. And that's the setup, right? That's the triangle. That's the plot. To make a long story short, Christian decides to propose to Roxanne. They get married, but just before they can sort of consummate the marriage, Christian is sent off to war by Count de Guiche, who has sort of some designs for Roxanne himself, and so that's kind of the next hurdle that they have to go through. He gets sent off. Cyrano follows him as a sort of fatherly companion figure, trying to protect him, trying to sort of set up the kind of make sure that Christian is kept out of danger and so on. None of this really works because he continues to write to Roxanne under Christian's sort of pseudonym, and Roxanne decides to come to the front to visit Christian to express all the appreciation that she has for his letters, supposedly, and it ends badly. Christian gets killed right at the time when she visits. Before he has a chance to explain himself and explain that it's actually Cyrano that's actually writing and expressing his thoughts and his feelings, and So basically, you have this this mystery that kind of keeps following them. 15 years later, after his death, Cyrano visits Roxanne in a monastery. She's in a monastery now, and finally, like,
Joe's there.
all right. All right. Okay, let's get rid of him. Yeah, I kind of thought it might be a unwanted visitor. Anyway, so that's that's the setup very quickly. The plot on the surface pretty straightforward, right? There's not much going on. Again, the question I have for all of you is this really that's going on? Is there some kind of deeper underlying reason why this play has been so successful? Is there, is it just the wit? Is it just the humor? Is it just the kind of the appeal of love and the kind of this love triangle, and is that all there's to it, or is there something else that perhaps we're missing, or we should be zooming in on? So with that, I'll open it up to a discussion. As always, if you want to type an exclamation point, that would be great. Or even, since there's so few of us, you don't even have to bother with that so much. Joe, go ahead.
So to your first question as to whether or not it had the same impact as, say, Othello or Sophocles or something, with anything, any of the other plays that we've covered, and I didn't feel that. I think that perhaps that's because they were probably addressing different and deeper issues. The duty between the state and your family, with Sophocles, as well as love, and a lot of, and as well as I'm trying to think of was it here King? I'm trying to think of the king's name. King Herod. Is it Herod? I forget. In Sophocles.
Wait, was it?
In Sophocles. In Antigone.
Oh, yeah.
Creon,
Anyway.
I don't remember.
Creon is the king, right? And
Creon. Thank you. Yes, I was trying to think of his
Drama
name.
major comes to to the rescue.
Very much. Yeah, I mean, and his feeling that feeling that he was obligated to do what he was doing, and that he thought what he was doing was right. And anyway, I don't want to go too far into that, but it was addressing, I thought, issues that were much deeper than just than maybe just a love story.
Mhm.
But that being said, I think anybody can read into this whatever they feel, and I think that it doesn't resonate with people primarily because it's almost like this. There is true love feeling to the play itself, and I find it that if you were to really look deep, you could probably say something around that the meaning of language and using words. If you're, and I feel like that would be a little bit of a stretch, but I think it's more about somebody's internal beauty versus their external beauty, and what people are really just attracted to, and I think that's where it kind of pretty much stands. But again, coming back to, I think Cyrano's ability to write and communicate with Roxanne, and for her to love him for who he is a reason as to why this is such a popular play. And if I were to say I'm trying to think of where I wanted to go next is maybe the very nature of beauty. I think that, and we were talking a little bit before this about there has to be some kind of physical attraction, I think, in a relationship. So I don't necessarily think that the way the play is kind of portrayed is not necessarily representative of reality. And so maybe that's another reason as to why it didn't necessarily resonate quite as much as, say, another, some of the other plays. I think, again, in Othello or other plays like that, they're tackling much deeper issues.
So could I paraphrase it, what you said, as to as perhaps it's a little bit artificial in its setup, where you have this dichotomy of either a person is beautiful but kind of dumb, if you will, versus smart and kind of has this wonderful internal world but ugly on the outside. Is that kind of a false dichotomy that you think is what's
Yes,
artificial?
I think that's
Okay.
what makes it. It's a flat out false dichotomy, and yeah. So
Okay, Ginny, go ahead.
Recently, Cyrano film just came out. Another version of the film came out, and the actor who's played Cyrano is it's not the politically correct term to say midget, but what do you call it? You know who actor I'm talking about?
I do actually. I know that.
Oh, is that the same guy who played?
Yeah, he was in Lord of the Rings, I think, or trilogy or so.
Probably you're thinking
He's
of Game of
yeah,
Thrones.
very good actor. I think that was an
Same person.
interesting way. Yeah. And it's just this thought came to my mind. I mean, maybe I'm slightly going off the topic, but do we ever come across in real life a scenario like this where one man, to impress the girl, write and speak in eloquent manner the way Cyrano? I mean, is there some scenario like that happen in real life ever? I don't know. Have you ever witnessed anything like that in real life?
Joe, do you have an answer for that?
I mean, I think that in our youth, that our values are a little bit different than as we get older. And I think we do value probably external beauty more than internal beauty when we're younger. So I do think that is one reason as to why this might, also resonate with people, is that it's because, I mean, we kind of see love or have a desire for love, or I think naturally. And I think that it's this feeling that it's not necessarily, it's not real. And I think that there are scenarios like that where people get caught up in physical beauty, and then they find out over the long run that it really isn't sustainable or something that's going to last. So I do think that there are a lot of scenarios like that, and then all of a sudden where people then pursue what is more meaningful to them. Sometimes, not everybody has the same journey, so to speak, but some people continue to value, I think, physical beauty, and maybe and has multiple relationships for that reason. But I do think that there are others that, as we get older, you start to look at things differently. Yeah, I mean, I think there is that journey, so to speak, between people. Anyway, I think people will value external beauty versus internal beauty at a younger age. That's all I was trying to.
Right. Well, speaking of, I thought I might want to share this depiction of Cyrano that I found. This is supposed to be the historical Cyrano. So let me share this with you. Can you see this?
So is that considered an ugly face? Is that right? Really?
That's supposedly how, you know, the prototype for the play looked like. You know, the historical Cyrano that lived in the 1600s. He actually did die. So the play is very accurate in terms of the dates. He did die in 1655, 15 years later, after the supposed incident in the theater where the play starts. So that's his, you know, he actually doesn't look so bad, right? I mean, he has a larger nose, so, you know.
Yeah, I mean, he looks okay to
And,
me.
and it's probably, you know, like we were debating with Joe just before the meeting. Is he, would you characterize him as a humble person because he's so much, you know, kind of denigrates himself because of his physical appearance? Or would you characterize him as a proud person because he's so kind of taken up with himself and his kind of honor and defending any sort of appearance of insult? You know, he is ready to kill people at the slightest, you know, insinuation that somebody might be somehow denigrating him. So what do you guys think about that? Is this a humble person or a proud person? And as a proud person, does he have? Go ahead, Eleanor.
I think it all depends on current trends. Sometimes people don't consider to be accordingly look to the beauty trend. So and I think people get humble and suppressed if they are not considered to be beautiful during that time or period. They most likely will not have a lot of success or not being a lot considered. So therefore they are suppressed and humble, I guess.
Okay. Joe, you agree with
Is
that?
it, I mean, I mean, I do see there's a certain amount of humility in him. And there is an element of unhealthy pride, and in the sense that, you know, he's so self-conscious about his nose that it prevents him from, you know, pursuing the woman he loves. So there is that, and I think that comes from pride, and so I think he's both, in a way. If I were to probably, you know, it would be interesting to see how a psychologist would actually classify his personality, in the sense that yeah, I mean, you know, essentially, is he somebody that's yeah, prideful, or somebody that's I think he's both. I don't know.
Well, also, I mean, aren't they supposed to be like early 20s in these characters? I mean, how many people do you know in their early 20s who are humble? And I mean, you're just so full of testosterone and, you know, energy, and, you know, you think most people, I would think there's not too much humbleness when you're in your 20s. I don't remember about myself being very humble.
That's a great point, Jenny. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, they're in their 20s, early 20s, most likely. Definitely Roxanne is right around that age, maybe even younger. But Cyrano is probably in his mid-20s, maybe early, yeah, just before 30 or something like that. So yeah, he is definitely not some self-effacing. In some ways, he is very much, like we said, self-conscious about himself, about his appearance, but he's not a self-effacing type of person. I mean, the play starts with him storming onto the stage of a theater and telling off the main player to get off the stage, right? Because he doesn't have the talent to be there. And then he invites somebody to a duel over, you know, a slight altercation, and everything in the play. He's the the ultimate alpha male, right? Kind of storming in, devil may care. He doesn't value his life at all, willing to throw it away. At the same time, I feel like there is a break in the play towards the fourth act, towards the end there. Roxanne admits that these letters that she thinks are supposedly from Christian have convinced her that even if he wasn't beautiful externally, that she would still fall in love with him. And that confession sets off two things. One, in Christian's mind, he actually feels a little threatened and insecure because he realizes that the letters are not his, it's Cyrano's. So what does she really like or love about him? If she doesn't really value his appearance, then there's nothing really that's left. Her attraction to him is based purely on or mainly now on the content of these letters, which he himself did not author. With Cyrano, he is now also in turmoil in some way, because he is realizing that perhaps it was a mistake to get into this sort of symbiotic union, this pact with Christian, and employ him as a kind of beautiful front figure while expressing his true feelings for Roxanne. So there is this kind of uncertainty, and then of course at the end, Christian is killed. Roxanne goes into mourning because she just still thinks of him as the author of these letters. And then towards the end of the play, obviously, as Cyrano rereads the last letter that supposedly Christian wrote, which is obviously not true, as she listens to him rereading it, she realizes, no, that obviously was Cyrano. He is the author, and she expresses that her love towards him just before he reveals that he's mortally wounded and he dies. So there's this sort of tragic, kind of classic tragic ending, worthy of a Greek tragedy, where everything starts off very well and ends up very poorly. But of course, it doesn't really read as a tragedy. You have all the kind of the wit and the excitement of a French theatrical scene, and everybody is a poet. Even a cook is a poet, and they are competing with each other, not just for women's attention, but for attention from each other, and recognizing each other's wit and ability to compose. And then that, of course, adds the kind of the comic and the comedic quality to the play. So I thought it was very good, especially the part where Regnault, who is a friend of Cyrano and a cook, cooks for most of the soldiers that intermix in the play, he is reciting a recipe in poetic form. So he is enjoying both his ability to his gastronomical and his poetical qualities in one. So anyway, yeah, so that's one of the questions that I had. I do want to mention just one thing before I forget. So there's this interesting tidbit. Just before Cyrano dies, he says that the only thing that's left that he's not willing to give up is his panache. And panache, the original word there is signifies like this plume on a helmet that a soldier wore into battle, which was his kind of his iconic, his image. And from what I understand, that word, it was at this time after this play that the word panache came into English language to mean sort of this flair, flamboyance, kind of this, in some ways, a defiance of convention, right? Which I find that very interesting, how a particular word comes into from one language to another based on a specific incident like this particular play and this, last words of Cyrano. So I just want to mention that before, because to me it's an interesting side story that's connected with this. The other one, another side story is this idea or this smaller scene in the play where Cyrano tries to distract Count de Guiche before Roxanne and Christian can get married, and to distract him, he composes this poem about different ways to get to the moon. Now, this poem and the different ways to get to the moon is based on an actual satirical work that the historical Cyrano de Bergerac actually published. It was, well, he wrote it. It was published after his death, which supposedly is the first actual science fiction work in history. I actually thought of like maybe Jules Verne or H.G. Wells as the first fiction writers, science fiction writers, but maybe it's actually Cyrano is the first science fiction writer, and his travel, the travels to the moon, some of which are purely fantastical and meant to be jocular and not meant to be taken seriously, but some are actually not far off. Like he proposes firing off a cannon and traveling on, inside the sphere that that's put into the cannon. So that is a rocket, essentially, right? And so this idea is not too far off from how we actually can get to the moon. So anyway, there's some other fantastical ideas, like using the power of the dew that rises, from in the morning to the upwards to kind of saddle that up. So anyway, a couple of these rabbit trails I thought were interesting and make for interesting kind of memorabilia around this play. So that's really that's all I have as far as any kind of interesting facts or observations. Any other observations or thoughts or impressions that you got? Go ahead, feel free to type an exclamation point or just raise your hand, or just go ahead, since there's so few of us. Go ahead, Joe.
I'll just return to this idea again. What really attracts us to someone else, and I think that's it's an interesting question. I mean, yes, as we had previously said, I think that there is this again combination of both. You have to be attracted to the individual, but the individual also has to be someone that you can connect with. And I think that means that on a personal level, not just in the poetic sense, in the way Cyrano is able to connect with Roxanne so much, but I think one of the reasons that we connect with people is that they complement us, and we have similar interests, and to some extent, and maybe this is another reason as to why this hasn't really resonated like the other plays. It kind of feels like that they're almost just connecting on this romantic level, but it's almost just intellectually, and it seems it's just doesn't seem deep, like as if she's feeling something in his life other than he's attracted to her because she's beautiful, and she's attracted to him because of his words. That's not deep. Like when I think of love, I think of somebody that has a way of they do certain things well, and you do certain things well, and together you're better together than you are apart. And I think that's something that where you think about love stories that are truly meaningful, then that resonates a little bit more. So I think that's also interesting to see how it plays out in our real lives. I mean, and how we evaluate people around us. And this is not only true with romantic relationships, these are always true. This is also true in professional relationships as well. So you kind of look at how people complement one another. Anyway, I think that's another reason as to why maybe this doesn't resonate quite as much as the other plays do. There's the lack of depth in real connection and seeing how they actually make each other better, so to speak. Anyway, that's my opinion.
Right. Yeah, I do want to comment on that real quick. So first impulse is to say, well, Roxanne, you're so superficial yourself.
Right.
All you're interested in is, first is looks, and then after looks, you want to have this sort of artificial quality in how a person expresses himself. So it's not really so much the true anything, character or anything else. It's this ability to clothe it in fancy sounding words or poetry or so on. That's the first impulse. Now, I want to say that I wonder though if we're too harsh, if we go with that first impulse, we're a little too harsh, because in reality, all of these things that are seen as kind of useless, perhaps, and artificial and external and superficial, are actually signs and markers, and the only way that the sexes can kind of evaluate each other. Think of the natural world, and I guess the classic example is the birds, and I'm thinking of it's the bird that has this huge tail. I'm going blank all of a sudden. Peacock, right?
Yeah.
Peacock has this amazing tail, right? So colorful, so lavish, so beautiful. In fact, it kind of makes it vulnerable. You would think it makes the bird vulnerable to predators. What is the point of all that? Well, the point is apparently is that only a very fit and healthy bird can afford to have a tail like this and still survive. So it is a sign of something underlying. So maybe a man who can dress well, express himself well, with wit and this ability to spontaneously come up with verses and poetry and these exquisite love sonnets and so on. Maybe that's tells a woman that he is in fact a person of profound intellect. And in case of Cyrano, that definitely turns out to be the case, right? Cyrano is in fact a profoundly smart, witty, deep person, right? Because he's struggling, but he is also he realizes he has a potential for something. He's not worthless, and he values that, and he values his flamboyance, and he values his kind of his way of life. Towards the end, he still says, "I'm not, even though I'm dying, I'm not giving up my flair, right? My panache. I'm still holding on to it." And he holds his rapier right to the end. So he has this quality about him. So maybe Roxanne is not as artificial and is not as superficial as we might judge her. Maybe she is just using what she has to make these type of value judgments of people. And so she's disappointed when Christian cannot express himself, because that betrays a certain deficiency in him, right? A certain lack of depth, a certain lack of quality. So maybe that's why it resonates with the public, right? That's why we still make these plays. That's why we still have movies made of this plot, even to this day. So, what do you think, Joe? And anyone else?
No, I mean, I think that's interesting. That yeah, it is that you can compensate for some of your shortcomings, so to speak, with, again, he's this well-spoken, educated gentleman. And so, I mean, it's interesting in the sense that after a while, it's funny that you may not have an instant attraction to someone, but you get to know them better and the attraction builds. And the attraction builds because you connect with, whatever it is they're offering. In this particular instance, it would be words, which is something that is something that does occur. People can compensate for their shortcomings in a lot of different ways, and their personality type and being kind. So maybe, yes, I guess in the sense, maybe she's not as superficial as we made her out to be, maybe 20 minutes ago. But I don't know. I don't also, I get the feeling that her attraction to Christian is very superficial. So, I mean, there's that aspect of it. I will say, she did say, and something along the lines of, I lost my love twice now, after he reads the letter. And I think that that's deep. And that does show a love, of, I would have loved you in spite of your shortcomings. So I think that there's that. And he's not a wealthy man either. So there's that part of it as well. So she's looking past that, these things that, and she's, truly falling in love with his intellect. I still, maybe I don't, it doesn't resonate with me for maybe a couple different reasons that I've already said. But even you can even say that the poetic aspect of it can be superficial. Even if you're attracted to somebody because they're poetic, all right, they make you feel good. That doesn't necessarily, is that real love? I mean, and that's kind of where we're going with this, I think. And what is it? How do you then define real love? It's I look at it as somebody caring about somebody deeply, to the point where their happiness is important to you, and whatever you're doing to make them happy, you're happily doing. You're doing it willingly. And so that's how I look at love. And one part of it, it's a very deep friendship and partnership. So that is a bit different than, say, than even just connecting with words. Anyway, that's just an initial thought. But I do think we can get past our initial impressions to become attracted to someone.
What about the story of Ragnar, the cook who aspires to be a poet, and the result of his aspirations, that his own wife feels neglected, and she leaves with a soldier that is one of his customers, essentially. Is that the same story, basically retold in parallel of the same thing? I mean, is basically his wife?
In reverse.
Or not in reverse, right? Because in both cases you have a situation where a person's inner gifts and inner qualities are rejected in favor of something, presumably looks, right, or something like that, something
Right.
more artificial. So it's something like that. Eleanor, a very interesting comment. Do you mind? Anyway, if you want, feel free to comment on that. This is interesting as well.
It's an opinion. I don't think that has something to do with the text. I'm not sure how far we should elaborate on what I was writing. I just think people do not fall in love with intellect. They fall in love with archetypes, which are changing during period of lifetime, and it's one person's moves to solve the archetypes, and this is what attracts us, the mythology of the archetype itself.
So, if I may, there's a well-known kind of trope about girls always fall for the bad guy, or for like the bad boy, the bad boy syndrome, or something like that. So what's the archetypal connection? Is the bad boy kind of like a hero? Is that the archetype, kind of this rebel that is willing to go against the rules? And is that why girls always fall for like the guy on a bike that does drugs and drinks a lot, or something like that?
I'm just trying to be, I may be being a little silly, but doesn't it only happens in high school? Once they get into college, don't they grow up a little bit? And
I don't know, Ginny, you tell me.
well, I mean, from the stories I've heard, over the years, it seems like it's the high school syndrome, high school age syndrome, going after the bad boys, being attracted to the bad boys.
Right.
I like to think that we grow out of it when we're in college.
So does that mean, to use Eleanor's expression, does that mean that your archetype changes as you grow? It does. Okay. All right.
Let's hope so.
Okay.
I mean, there's a reason for everything, but not every woman falls for bad boys. There's same amount of women who do fall for teachers and
That's
intellect.
true. That's true.
They're the archetype of a wise person too. So it just depends.
But I've said this at many meetings last year or so, or for 6 months, whatever. I don't know why I think that whatever we do, whatever decisions we make, whatever we do, whether it be in terms of food or love, it's like ultimately we do something for us, ourselves. We're human beings, are ultimately selfish beings, It's like you fall in love, but ultimately you fall in love because falling in love feels good and makes you feel good about life, or about, maybe I'm just being a cynic, but
Well,
yeah.
maybe it's somewhat tautological to say that, because
So I'm being what?
maybe there's a tautology in saying that, because we do what we do. So by definition, it's coming from us, right? It is somewhat selfish just because we're the authors of whatever we do. So to say that everything is self-centered in that sense, I mean, yes, of course we do everything for ourselves because it's coming from us. But does that necessarily ring true in a larger kind of sense? Because a lot of things that we do for other people. So on some level, I guess we do it for ourselves too, perhaps.
But even when I'm being nice to somebody or doing something good for somebody, ultimately I feel good for having done something for somebody and helping somebody. Yeah. So even in that regard, I think I'm ultimately doing it for myself, to serve myself, even when I'm being good to other people. I don't know. Again, maybe I'm being a cynic.
Yeah, I think we're more complex than that. I mean, obviously, we get rewards for being good. Does that negate our goodness just because we're given a reward? I guess it could. Depends on your motives. To what degree or something like that, you were doing something to get that reward. I think we get some sort of dopamine, rush when we do something extraordinary, right? But does that mean that we did it initially for that, to get the rush? I don't know. I mean,
when you're helping somebody and you feel good for helping somebody, being nice to somebody, it's like win-win situation. You're making that other person happy, but you're making yourself happy too. Yeah. That's one way of saying it.
Guilty about it. That's I guess my point. I wouldn't feel guilty about getting a reward.
Right.
I think that's motives, and who knows? It's hard for us to know our own motives, much less other people's, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Dostoevsky has a good saying about that. Another man's soul is like a dark corner or something like that. I can't translate it exactly, but it's very hard for us to know another person's motivations, right? And they're not always all cloned either. We have extraordinary people doing extraordinary things that, maybe are they doing it just to get some sort of inner check box checked, and feel good about themselves? I don't know. I would hope that people in the Titanic, when they were giving seats to women and children, weren't. I mean, maybe they were ticking that checkbox too, but they knew they were going to die. So is that really that important to them to have a checkbox and rather than live? To me, it seems like it was a good act, regardless of the motivation at that point. Joe, what are you going to say?
no, I just think that I mean, and I don't want to get too far off topic, but it essentially does altruism exist and true altruism, and then essentially,
Yeah, I'm
what we're
an
asking.
idealist. I believe in altruism, even though
Me too.
there's definitely some rewards that I don't say get in the way. They could tarnish our motives for sure. But again, everyone is different. People have different things that drive them. In Cyrano's case, getting back to Cyrano, there's definitely something about him. He needs to be himself, and he's not willing to give that up for anything. And when he dies, he still says that, that line about the panache, and that line where he holds his rapier and his sword towards the end, and he's not willing to die on his knees, essentially, is, talking about pride and kind of this attitude of defiance, and maybe even useless defiance in some ways. It still kind of perhaps attracts us on some level. It gives us this idea that we are more than just the sum of our parts. Maybe we're more than just our physical body, our physical existence even. And so this character that Edmond Rostand created, he definitely outlived, made the archetype or prototype of that play outlive his own physical limitations, right? Or gave him a new life.
Yeah, no, the willingness to sacrifice yourself, right, for something, right? So yeah, no, I think that it does exist, where that there is that not everything is ego driven, is what I would say.
I do have a question for the audience as well. So it seems to me that the French and maybe Europeans in general have they put a slightly more weight on this ability to present yourself, to carry yourself, to have this sort of artistic quality, on being able to be well spoken, right? Maybe in the States, it's more about kind of the pragmatical aspects of just, what's the bottom line, right? It doesn't really matter how we get there. And so I'm torn about it. I'm not sure, like, I'm not making a judgment. I'm just making thinking out loud. But on the other hand, think of products and how they're advertised. Everything is about presentation, right? It's not so much the product per se, it's about how it's packaged, how it's very carefully presented to the customer base, if I may add this vulgarism to our conversation. So are we putting premium on the outward? And is it, the same in Europe or in the States or anywhere else? Or is there some distinction? What do you guys think?
I think cultures have different values. I mean, I don't think that that's unfair to say. And I do think that commercialization is real. And however that appears, I mean, to a certain extent, I think you're just asking, in a way, what do we really value? What do cultures really value? And what do, in certain cases, the arts hold more weight than say monetary gain. And so I think that there are those types of things. Now, which one are you going to say is more artificial, right? To a certain extent, and that's also a value judgment. I would, think that money in and of itself is really not, or monetary gain, whatever it may be, is not necessarily something that is it's necessary, but it's not necessarily sufficient, obviously, for anybody's happiness. Whereas I think that the arts are, yes, I think there are cultures that value the arts more, and I think that personally, I do too. And I think it's a personal value judgment as well. So I think it's.
Do you think it's
anyway,
that
I don't know.
it's a function of kind of the egalitarian nature of the United States, where you have more people kind of on the same level versus Europe, which has always been a much more class conscious society, where you have a lot more aristocracy, a lot of more historical roots, and therefore you have a lot more emphasis on not just the end result, but on how things look, on aesthetics, on the outward.
And something else I've noticed about European people, I go to this meeting, I call it the Barcelona group. It's based in Barcelona, but mostly European people come into this meeting from France and Spain. And I found that over the years, not just during during these meetings, is that Europeans in general, for one, are more upon what's going on throughout the world, what's happening throughout the world, not only in their country, but other countries. When I'm in these meetings, they know exactly what's going on with Trump and, Biden and, whereas if you ask Americans in general, oh, what's happening in France? Who's the president of France? Who's the president of Spain? Or what's going on politically in those countries? I more than likely they'll have no idea what's going on. Whereas I think Europeans in general are more upon what's going on throughout the world, not just their own country. So that tells me something about the kind of people who live in Europe, that their sense of value, their sense of intellect. And that's my feeling about Europeans.
Okay. Eleanor, what do you think?
I think it's depends on the person and interests. Not everyone is into politics, and not everyone understands intra-political, internal, social stuff. I mean, as I came to America, I had to learn how Americans see Germans. I didn't know that this is the way how they see us. So, and now I know. And I'm a little bit shocked and scared too. So, but I didn't necessarily understood political things. And plus, why would somebody be interested for politics which are not yours? I'm still not. So it depends on the person where they're coming from. And I mean, maybe I'm coming from arts, and I'm just not interested in everyone's business,
Well,
So-
in general, I think the question is more about just aesthetics. And
aesthetics. Yeah, I think Americans are all about aesthetics more than other people.
more than other people? Okay, interesting.
Yeah, I feel like yeah, I get here judged more specifically in New York for what I wear and how I'm dressed. In Germany, I can walk however I want to. I'm not being judged by my clothes. I'm being judged by my tasks and how I do things. But here is all about how you look like, and it's less about and what you wear, and it's less about how good you are. So it's totally different, yeah. For me,
Okay, so you're saying Europeans appreciate intellect more than just beauty, surface beauty, is what you're saying.
Yeah,
Americans
you
are
have to
more
be
into
functional.
surface beauty.
Yeah,
Yeah, I agree with you on that. Yeah. Mhm.
So if I'm not functional, I have certain looks, I'm not gonna hold long, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Somebody else has to work for me, so no, it's not gonna work out.
Interesting.
And I also like, I appreciate like Philip, the way he speaks and writes Russian and English, speaks perfect English. And I think a lot of Europeans speak more than one language. There are very few Americans who speak more than one language. You know, that's another thing about Americans. And I guess part of it is because they're not surrounded by all these other countries like European, small countries are next to each other, and they don't need to speak other language. But Americans, they only speak one language, you know, basically, you know, so.
But Americans also provide other people luxury when you call in a bank or when you call a doctor, they provide you with your language. So you have people are comfortable, they don't need really to learn because they can always speak their language. In Europe, people request you to speak their language, so and this is what they are delivering to you too. So what you request, you're supposed to deliver to others. I mean, if I call some bank, there's no button for me for German language. If I want banking, I have to learn English, right? So therefore I will. And in Germany, they don't give you buttons for French. You need to learn German.
So how many languages do you speak, Eleanor?
Yeah, couple.
How many?
More than 3.
My goodness.
I sometimes don't consider the ones which I speak halfway that I own them. I only consider the ones I can speak, I think 100% are 3. But there are a couple which I don't own really. So.
Yeah, but that's certainly more than I speak, right, Joe?
Yeah, no, very much more. You know, it's funny that you asked that question, Phil, because I wonder if it's, yeah, I've thought the same thing. I mean, I had a family that was actually living with me for a short period. And they were from France, and they got dressed properly every day and makeup done every day, and there was that kind of I don't know, this way of how you hold yourself actually very much matters. Now that's anecdotal evidence, but I do think that it is valued. I think the way, and just as yeah, I mean, I think that I would just say that it is something that I did notice, and maybe they do value aesthetics more, and I do think, again, if you really look at what countries, they have their own personalities and what they find to be important, whether it be the arts or something along those lines or not. So I think that there are those characteristics of a country anyway.
So in this conversation, in the course of this sort of dialogue that we're having, here's a thought that comes to me. When we started talking about aesthetics, we went into outward appearance and clothing and so on. But initially, aesthetics, I was talking about the ability to express yourself. So aesthetics, not from the standpoint of what you wear, but from the standpoint of how do you present yourself, how do you carry yourself in a conversation, and so on. Now, both of those things are, aesthetically pleasing or not, depending on if you have taste and ability and so on. So what it seems to me is that Roxanne starts out with this view to beauty that is primarily focused on the outward, the kind of like we were talking about, the clothing and so on. But eventually she gets to the next level. It's still aesthetics. She's still attracted to beauty, but beauty of a higher caliber, if you will. So remember, in Plato's Symposium, you have the same kind of setup where love is first presented as love of a beautiful appearance. And then you realize that that's just a reflection of this idea of beauty that is much more permanent than, the outward, the physical, the temporary beauty that fades. And so perhaps it's the retracing of the same ideal for Roxanne, as she realizes that she's always, what she's always been attracted to is beauty, but not beauty in a sense of clothing or outward looks, but a beauty of a particular character, particular intellect, particular mind, and specifically Cyrano. And she realizes that she loves him, of course, always at the last minute and always too late, because now he's dying. But is that interpretation, does that ring true to you? Like this interpretation that really it's a story of a developing sense of beauty and developing aesthetics that simply starts off in a more primitive place, but eventually gets to a higher plane.
That's why she's a heroine. That's why she grows within the play, from surface beauty to intellectual beauty, appreciating a higher form of beauty, if I could call it that. That's why she's the heroine.
Right.
Yeah, I think that is interesting, especially when I didn't think of Plato's Symposium right away, but actually that's in a interesting way to look at love, and a deep way, obviously. And so, yes, there's this eros that you're essentially initially have this attraction towards someone, but then something deeper, if that kind of is something that is not as important, and something deeper, you're looking for something deeper, and that's something that becomes eternal, for lack of a better word, where there's a deeper appreciation and it's more sustainable than say just this initial attraction. And I think that's looking at it from the perspective of Symposium is a good way of actually of determining, like, kind of what is really most meaningful, and what are the higher ideals. And it's yeah, I mean, but some people never actually make that journey. And so in a way it is a journey, but you can't discount the fact that she did seem to have a love for him, that would have, like, she would have fallen for Cyrano no matter what. There is that aspect of it, even though Christian is her her deep attraction. So anyway, yeah, it is interesting to see the how the conversation evolved. It kind of mimics how the play evolved as well.
In my opinion, that is not to say you negate physical beauty. It sure is nice to have physical beauty and intellectual beauty all in one package, I mean, I certainly myself, especially when I was young, oh, isn't he cute? And then it goes beyond that. Once you are attracted to that cuteness, good looking or physical beauty, you realize, oh yeah, I need more than that. You need somebody who's intelligent, well-read, blah, blah, blah. And so you would like to have, more than one or two items in that package.
You want it all, Ginny, don't you?
Oh, what's that?
You want it all.
That's right. We want it all. I think most human beings do, right?
Of course we do.
I mean, when you're, especially again, going back to high school, when you're in high school, it's like, isn't he cute? Oh
Right.
yeah, he's cute. That physical stuff. And then eventually when you go to college, no, I'm just being silly. You appreciate the intellectual.
Yeah, no, for
Anyway.
sure. And again, we have the same thing happening in the play. Just if you remember, there is that scene where Christian, at one point, he says to Cyrano, "Look, I want to express myself now. Thank you. You helped me out.
Right.
I want to do it myself." And then he stumbles and he fumbles and he can't tie two words together. And Roxanne is terribly disappointed, and she's at the brink of saying, that's it, we're done. And so it turns out that, it's not just the beauty, it's not just his appearance. She actually wants him to be a smart and eloquent and kind of passionate person, and not just say, oh, well, I just love you, so let's go, let's get married.
Yeah.
And
that
also, if it was just the two-dimensional kind of a person and play, then it would not have remained as a classic the way it is. And the reason that this play is a classic is because it has all these ingredients,
Mhm.
heroine growing, and growing as a person, and all these, nuances and complexity within the play. That's what makes it a classical play.
Yeah, no, for sure. Just one quick observation, though. There is one level of this evolution that is removed here, which is the final step, right? In Plato's Symposium, you finally go from assigning these qualities to a specific person to assigning them to this idealized something, a being, right? That's kind of like in Dante, right? He goes from his love of Beatrice to realizing that what he sees in her is actually a reflection again of this divine love and so on, the beatific vision that he has at the end. This is missing in Edmond Rostand's work for whatever reason, probably because Europe at this point is pretty much secular already, and it doesn't have the same religious kind of underpinnings. And also it's a more kind of playful, everything about this play is much more playful than something like Dante's Divine Comedy. It's much more about people's concerns here on earth versus some kind of heavenly or distant future. So that step is removed, and really it ends at that point where you go from kind of the not crude, but maybe external beauty to something a little deeper inside, but it's still about that specific person. It's not generalized in that sense. So I thought I'd just mention that.
I'm coming back to that one scene that you were talking about where Christian wants to stand on his own 2 feet, so to speak. That is interesting to see how Roxanne reacts to that, where basically Cyrano has to jump in and save him, and so it's kind of it does show that there is a depth to her that maybe I wasn't assigning that initially. In just kind of reading this in passing, I forgot that scene until you just mentioned it, and now that I recall, I think that there is that was interesting, both for even looking at it from Christian's perspective, that he wanted to kind of step out on his own and really prove to himself that that this was something deeper than just his appearance and her attraction to his appearance and his words. So I think he was looking to prove something to himself as well.
And that also you give Christian's character a credit too for wanting to do that.
Right.
So he's growing too. He's growing within, during this process. If he just remained a parasite throughout the entire play, then you would not have appreciated Christian's character as much either, I think. Yeah.
Agreed. Although I have to say it's a little bit too convenient that he dies. It'd be interesting to see what would have happened if he was not sort of taken out of the play. How would it have developed? Would he have admitted to Roxanne that in fact he wasn't writing her all these letters, and would she just say, okay, then bye?
Right. So long.
And they were married at that point too. It's kind of like,
She's pretty hardcore, this woman. She's
Maybe he knew that because an architect needs to die. And this is where we are back to the puzzle. When the puzzle is solved, the architect dies. Maybe it's not a literal death.
Oh,
maybe
I
you can take it. Maybe if he really died, so it fits in a context of an archetype. It's kind of like a little bit sarcastic, even. I think.
No,
But
this is great. This actually it goes right along what Ginny was saying. How girls grow out of this obsession with bad boys in high school. So in a sense, their archetype that they have at that age dies, and it's replaced by another, something that's a little more, versatile and useful perhaps for the rest of their lives. So yes, this is a good point. Maybe that's we don't need to take it literally so much as kind of this idea that Roxanne finally grows out of this kind of image in her head of what is beautiful, which is just a picture of Christian, his beautiful, whatever, he's tall and handsome and so on. And now she is really, what spurs her to come to the front of the battle in the first place? It's the letters, right? She doesn't see him, but she's reading these letters. And at some point she gets so moved by them that she feels she has to come and see him in person before maybe he could die at any moment. So yeah, maybe there is that growth that Jeannie was mentioning, that she is growing in the process of all this.
Yeah, again, I think that's how we evolve over time. And I don't actually think that guys are totally exempt from that either, in the sense that their values also do change. It is no longer just outer beauty that is the most meaningful thing. That there's also a greater appreciation for the personality and the individual that you're actually with. And because to be quite honest, let's just say that Christian and Roxanne were living their lives out. It probably would have ended very quickly. And I don't think that's not necessarily representative of a lot of relationships today, where they actually end pretty quickly once they realize that it's nothing more than an initial attraction that's there. I think that's, and then they go, individuals themselves, they go to look for something more meaningful. And I guess there is this, you're searching for meaning. Physical beauty is just not as meaningful as it is the inner beauty at a certain point.
All right. Well, that's a great note to sort of tie everything into one knot from this play. I don't have any other comments or sort of on the subject. Do you guys have any sort of last words that you want to contribute? Anything? No pressure. Just if you have some additional remarks.
No, I just want to thank you for staying with the meeting, even though it's a smaller turnout. Thank you for staying with the meeting. And there's another one later on, right? Shrikant is having a Bucky meeting later tonight, right?
That's correct.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah,
7 o'clock your 8 o'clock your time.
8 o'clock my 8 o'clock my time, 8 o'clock New York time.
Okay, so I'll see you again, probably, right?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. You'll
it
see.
was fun hanging out with you.
What?
It was fun hanging out with you.
Oh, it
was
was
very
nice
nice
meeting you too,
spending-
Eleanor. Yeah.
No, it was very nice spending time with
Now you
everyone.
do the play discussion once a month, Philip?
It's every 2 weeks.
Oh, 2 weeks. Every 2
This
weeks.
actually concludes our initial series. So
Okay.
we had kind of initial cycle of the plays. We went all the way from the Greeks all the way to kind of modern plays.
Yeah.
And we will probably keep doing this. So we'll keep going from kind of in these cycles, trying to go through different historical periods and covering various writers, throughout.
So do you have an idea about some of the other
I
plays?
have sent Shrikant a preliminary list of various plays that I would like to cover. So we're still finalizing that, but we'll
Okay.
definitely we'll keep you posted. We'll announce it on the meetups. So yeah, stay tuned.
And one of the plays I come to my mind is Waiting for Godot.
Oh, wow.
That would be a funny discussion, you know.
Well,
Yeah,
yeah,
I read that in high school. I
Did
mean,
you?
yeah,
Yeah,
that
yeah,
was
could make for an interesting discussion.
I'm sure whatever we pick will be good. We try to stay with the classics, right? So we try to stay with works that have earned their stripes, and yeah, I'm sure it's going to be
And their distinction.
well known. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, thank you.
have a
See you
good evening.
soon. Bye.
We'll talk soon.
take
Bye.
care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.